Tropical Storm Wanda, the lone presence being monitored by the National Hurricane Center as we enter into November, a month where hurricanes are possible, but is it all that likely that one will form? Our team of meteorologists are here with an answer with a live Q&A here on Tracking the Tropics. Hey there, everybody. JB Buno here with you live in your hurricane headquarters. Got a full team here with us today on Tracking the Tropics. Of course, we've got Eric Stone above me, Amanda Holly from WFLA in the top right-hand portion of your screen. And joining us from Tennessee, it is WATE meteorologist Justin Kiefer. Great to have Justin here on the program. We're going to be featuring your questions in the meteorologist Q&A here using any of the hashtags that you see on your screen. Hashtag Hey Justin, hashtag Hey Amanda, hashtag Hey Eric, hashtag Hey JB. I will ask the first question to everybody here, our entire panel. When you guys think of November, Eric, what's the first thing you think of that comes to mind when you think of the month of November?
Thanksgiving, turkey, of course.
Amanda, what about you?
I was going to say Thanksgiving too.
Justin?
My birthday.
Your birthday. All right, we got a birthday coming up here. But
I get a twofer on this because the November hurricane hit the Florida Panhandle when I was a student meteorologist at Florida State on my birthday.
Well, then,
so
wow.
There you go. Only a meteorologist would think of hurricanes as far as the month of November.
Right.
Most people are thinking about Thanksgiving. They're thinking about football. They're thinking about, if anything, with weather, they're thinking about cooler air. But we're going to get into the chances of there being a November hurricane. But first and foremost, I want to send things over to Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Amanda Holly with the latest here on Wanda and where we are in the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, Amanda.
Well, we've got a little under a month to go, and yes, November we typically see a significant drop-off in tropical activity, which is good news, but right now we are tracking an active tropical storm, and that's Wanda, but you can see where it is located with respect to the United States. It's far away, and it's churning out in the middle of the Atlantic, and we're not expecting it to affect the United States. But that's not to say that we won't see another storm within the next several weeks. It's certainly possible, although you can see here on the climatology graph that the November time frame we really don't see that much activity. Obviously, August, September, and October see a significant more amount of activity there. Tropical Storm Wanda, though, right now, maximum winds at 50 miles per hour. It's moving north-northeast at 10 miles per hour, so kind of a fast-moving storm there, if you will. It is going to meander for the next couple of days. We will be talking about this one, but again, even as it meanders and kind of maintains its strength, not going to affect the United States. It's going to stay in the north central Atlantic. But Wanda did use the last name on our 2021 list of names. So that means we had 21 storms. And if we see another named storm form, we have to move to our supplemental list of names here. So now, again, this is going to be used in lieu of the Greek alphabet, the first name being Adria. But good news, even after Wanda, doesn't look like we have much activity out there to be concerned about right now. This is typically where we look for the month of November for the development of tropical systems kind of just north of the Caribbean. And this is typically because we see cold fronts come in. The water is still plenty of warm enough for that tropical development. But those cold fronts, they come in, they stall out, and some areas of low pressure can develop along those. If they develop those tropical characteristics, they can get a name. So that's kind of where we look at November. Again, though, guys, Wanda, not a threat. We'll continue to monitor this cold front, actually, that will develop an area of low pressure in the Gulf over the next couple of days. At least Eric and I are paying close attention to this. Might not get a name, but it is going to bring us possibly some strong storms on Friday and into Saturday. So we'll be watching this one closely.
Of course, that's what we're watching here in Florida. Justin Kiefer joining us from a little bit north of us in Tennessee. Great to have Justin here on the program. You can use any of the hashtags here on your screen, everybody. We want to feature some of the questions and comments that are coming in. We got one in the queue, but Justin, let's send things over to you here. What do you think of where we are in the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season?
Well, it's pretty amazing if you think about, we've exhausted, obviously, the first list of names, but a lot of the names that showed up early were really brief. A few of them lasted less than one day, but got a name, and then it either moved inland or dissipated over the Atlantic. I can think of 3 or 4 for sure that, prior to satellites or at least prior to better remote sensing, likely wouldn't have gotten a name. Regardless, that's where we are at the end of the list. It's possible that one of these sort of mid-latitude cyclones that gets out over the Atlantic could sit long enough, or at least sort of sit over some warmer Gulf Stream waters. You could see a subtropical system. More than likely, we might be done. I hope so. Put an end to that. It's an interesting, as you look at the graph there, the tropical climatology, obviously the peak in early September, there's sort of that secondary peak in early October, you get to November. See, it has a little secondary, third, tertiary peak first week of November, and there's been several storms in November. Obviously not numerous, but you can't discount the possibility. Typically, it's a Western Caribbean formation, and they head away from the lower 48. But you certainly have to watch it all the way through November. That's what we always say. It's November 30th. It's not November 1st. So it's certainly 1 month in the tropical season that you have to keep an eye on.
Definitely getting some cooler weather here in the month of November, but will we get a hurricane? Use any of the hashtags you see on your screen, hashtag Hey Justin, hashtag Hey Amanda, hashtag Hey Eric, and hashtag Hey JB. We will feature your comments and questions coming in here. Eric, it was a year ago, just a year ago, 365 days ago from right now, we're keeping a very close eye on Ada. Not only a November hurricane, but a November hurricane that did make its presence felt here in the United States. So what are the chances, in your estimation, that Adria does become something that we need to monitor here in the United States?
Well, if you remember Tropical Storm Ada, it started in the Caribbean, and all the models initially had it hitting Nicaragua and weakening, although the GFS was the outlier. It actually had it hitting Central America and coming up through Cuba and pretty close to Key West. And I looked at that model and I was like, that's interesting. And all of a sudden, other models followed suit, and that's really what happened. I don't think, as for now, we're going to see anything like that, but anything can happen. It's November. These cold fronts have been sweeping pretty far to the south, so if anything does develop, the cold fronts are probably going to sweep it out into the Atlantic. There'd have to be something forming well to the south, somewhere that the cold front wouldn't pick it up and take it out into the Atlantic, so somewhere in the southern Caribbean. And National Hurricane Center, I believe it was yesterday or Monday, actually had an area that we're watching in the southwest Caribbean. The good news is it did move west into Central America. It did not develop, and it is not going to take a turn in our direction. So things are looking pretty good right now.
Let's get to the first question coming in here. Comes in from Bobby Curtis Shehorn, hashtag Hey Amanda, for tracking the tropics meteorologist Amanda Holly. Is there a chance that Tropical Storm Wanda will become a hurricane? And Bobby here is watching from Pass Christian, Mississippi. So hello there to Bobby, and the question for meteorologist Amanda Holly.
So right now it is just a tropical storm with those maximum winds of 50 miles per hour, and put on the latest track from the National Hurricane Center for you. They do officially not have it becoming a hurricane, and I don't think it will become. It's very far north in the Atlantic. Those water temperatures, they're not as warm as the southern Atlantic and the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, and it's dealing with some stronger winds as well. So I do think it's going to stay a tropical storm, which again, still in the middle of the Atlantic, not going to affect the United States in either way.
Next question's coming in. It just came in here a moment ago from Lauren Michelle. For all of our meteorologists, hashtag Hey Justin, hashtag Hey Amanda, hashtag Hey Eric, moved here a few years ago to the east coast of Florida from Ohio. What is your advice on how to best prepare for storms besides stocking up on certain items? Justin, why don't we send this over to you here first? Advice for somebody. I've never heard of somebody from a northern state moving to Florida. That is completely and totally unheard of, right? But what advice would you have for Lauren?
Yeah, that hasn't happened very much lately. Having lived through a hurricane, several storms, but obviously a Category 5 Hurricane Michael a few years ago, there are certain things that you desperately have to do leading up to any storm, and preparation is the key. But you need to prepare for the water and the power, if you're in a coastal zone, to be out for extended periods of time. In my case, personal case, I did not have water for 8 days. I did not have power for about 15 days. And I was fortunate because in my town, several areas didn't get it back for weeks, if not months, as far as power. So we talked about have 3 days of water on hand for each person in the household. Well, think about not having any water for 8 days. So you can't stack up that much water in your garage. So what's a thing to do? I think the best preparation to do, you want the batteries, you want some food supplies, but if you're in a zone that is going to be threatened, have a plan to evacuate and have a place to go. Set it up long before the storm ever arrives. And then when you are in an imminent danger, maybe 3 days away, gas up and cash up, because if the power goes out, the pumps don't work and the ATMs don't work, and you're going to be stuck in a zone where you may not be able to get out. So there's certain things you certainly should do before a storm gets there. But I would say have that water supply, maybe 5 days worth of supplies, not just 3. And you talk about your pets and medicines and things like that. There's just a tremendous amount of logistics you need to go through in the anticipation of a landfalling hurricane. From coming up north, it is an experience that you will likely have never had, even with big winter storms, if it's a major landfalling hurricane. So, take the advice of the local officials, watch the local meteorologists, and listen carefully to what they say. And if you can have a plan to get out of the way of that storm, it's the best thing to do is leave. If you're close to the water, as we've always heard, you want to hide from the wind and run from the water. And I think that's the best advice you can have if you're close. But, it only takes one storm. It can be a tropical storm that can be a major problem, or it can be a Cat 5 hurricane.
I'll kind of add on to that, Justin.
Sure.
Just with the evacuation protocols, everyone thinks if a major storm is coming through, you got to evacuate and you got to go states away. That's not always the case, depending on the storm. Of course, with Hurricane Michael, it was a significant storm, right? Obviously, very powerful storm that traveled far inland with those really strong winds. But when you're making those plans and thinking about the evacuation zones, you could always have a backup plan to just go to a friend's house that might be farther inland. You don't have to evacuate states away. I think that was a big problem here in Florida during Hurricane Irma, where everyone just felt that they had to leave the state and the roads were just completely locked up because everyone was just trying to head north. But you don't have to leave the state. You're just, again, what you just said, Justin, you're trying to hide from the wind and you're running from the water. So if you can go far enough inland to a friend's house, it's in a sturdy location, you should be okay.
Yeah, we had personal friends, my family, who lived across the bay from Tyndall Air Force Base, which is obviously where Hurricane Michael made the eye cross the coastline. The eye went directly over their house. The morning of that storm, Wednesday, October 10th, 2018, they left that morning and went inland about 25 miles, at least got away from, because they live right on the water. So at least got away from the water, got out of that wind zone. And you're right, if you can do that, if that's the last resort, because you're absolutely right, the clogging of the main, 75 or 95 or the turnpike through Florida, you're really putting lives at risk by clogging those roads, because then first responders can't get there. You might run out of gas while you're on the highway. I saw that with Hurricane Opal over in Pensacola back in 1995. People ran out of gas while waiting on the interstate because everybody tried to leave at one time. So you're right. If you can get to a further inland, but maybe not completely out of the zone, but at least get away from the water, not a bad idea.
Ann Axon here, #AJB South Florida, saying, thank God for another uneventful season. Eric, you've been a Florida meteorologist for many years, and this is knock on wood here. I'm literally going to knock on my desk.
I don't want to say that for another month, but thank God that it's looking in that direction. Back to the evacuations and all. Some people think, we have to drive north, right? But sometimes if the hurricane's moving to the north, maybe you want to drive south toward the Miami area. But the one thing I always stress is you want to evacuate, or you want to get out while the sun's still shining. You want to get out 2 to 3 days before, if that is your plan. But it is a good idea that if you do have friends inland, a pretty safe bet that the worst case scenario is you'll deal with some freshwater flooding.
Let's get to this question. Just came in from Melvin Geloneck, #HeyAmanda, for meteorologist Amanda Holly. One of the big ingredients for hurricanes is water temperatures. Haven't the cold fronts already cooled off the temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico? And I know that we have a water temperatures graphic here that Amanda's queuing up. But this is, again, something we talk about quite a bit here on Tracking the Tropics, that the fuel for hurricanes is, and the fuel for tropical development is those sea surface temperatures, those warm temperatures of the Gulf. So, again, this question from Melvin Geloneck for Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Amanda Holly.
Yeah, those cold fronts, we've had a couple of strong ones come through so far, and they have cooled off those water temperatures. I mean, you can see basically the Gulf is in the low 80s at this point, which is much lower than what we see in the middle of summertime. August, September, it's typically when we see our warmest water temperatures, sometimes, breaking that 90-degree mark, which is just basically excess fuel for tropical systems. But low 80s is still plenty warm enough to keep a tropical system sustained and feeding it and to continue to, make it strengthen. So we still watch the Gulf of Mexico because, again, those water temperatures warm enough for that tropical development, but they are certainly cooler, if you will, than August and September.
Let's get to the last question in our queue. It comes from WATE's Facebook page. Yeah, that's where Justin Kiefer is joining us from in Knoxville, Tennessee. KD Boardman from that Facebook page, hashtag Hey Justin. What would it mean, if anything, for Eastern Tennessee if this hurricane makes landfall during winter? And let's just make it very clear that Wanda is not a threat to Tennessee, nor anywhere really here in the United States. But this is just an interesting question, Justin, from KD, talking about a hurricane's potential impacts on Eastern Tennessee.
Well, I think there's an anecdote close to that, and that's the 1993 in quote storm, the century of the superstorm, which was March of 1993. That storm got its genesis over the Gulf of Mexico and then came up the Atlantic seaboard. Now, it was a winter storm. It wasn't a tropical storm, but it was in March. Things were warm. The waters were warming. It had a tremendous amount of energy in it. And there were areas in East Tennessee that picked up 40 to 60 inches of snow because there was cold air that came in on the west side of it while the warm moisture went up over it. And some of the all-time greatest snow totals happened during that storm for parts of the Tennessee Valley, if you will. And there were people, it was March, so it was already spring, and the people were enjoying the coming out of leaves and flowers and camping and whatnot. They had to have helicopter evacuations because of the snow in the mountains of East Tennessee. That was due to the snow that fell of this March storm. But on the southern side of that, they had a 12-foot storm surge up in Taylor and Dixie County in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico, and they had numerous. I lost count, but I think it's like 1,000 different sort of boat rescues and water rescues out over the Gulf of Mexico and in the Atlantic due to the high surf because of that. A hurricane in the winter, not likely, but we did have that fall storm come through around Halloween of last year, and we actually had parts of our market under tropical storm warning. And because the leaves were not completely off the trees, we had a lot of trees come down, a lot of weight up in the trees because all the leaves hadn't fallen. You can get a 50, 60, 70 mile an hour wind, especially on top of the mountains. And then those trees start coming down. You have power outages, things like that. But as far as in the winter, and let's just talk about Wanda, that's not happening. But it's likely not going to. Once you can bring some fronts down there, clear out the Gulf, start dropping that water temperature, you get a lot of wind shear. East Tennessee likely not affected directly by one of those hurricanes.
Hurricane season itself, of course, ends here with the month of November, but that does not mean that tropical development is impossible in months outside of hurricane season. I lied. We're going to get this one more comment because it comes from a station that you know well, a station's Facebook page that you know well there, Justin, from Kristen Blankenship at WMBB's Facebook page, #HeyJB. Michael was crazy for those here in Bay County. Here's hoping for a smooth ride into the holidays. Justin, we'll send things over to you here to kind of end us out here on Track and Tropics. Yeah, we hope for a smooth ride into the holidays.
I hope so too. I had visited friends. Our family had visited friends recently in Bay County in the Panama City area. There's still blue tarps on houses. Pretty remarkable. It's just everything was damaged or destroyed in especially Eastern Bay County in the Florida Panhandle, and many businesses it never came back. So yeah, it has hopefully a smooth ride into the holidays. I just want to think back to November of 1985. I talked about Hurricane Kate hit Mexico Beach as a Category 2 hurricane. So they can happen. Don't let your guard down, even all the way through the month of November.
Well, I think I'm speaking for all of us, for folks in Louisiana all the way through to the Florida Panhandle, that I think they deserve a break. And the last thing they need between now and Thanksgiving, Amanda and Eric, right, is more tropical development. So we hope, Eric, Amanda, we hope that it stays quiet like it is right now, relatively quiet, even though we have Wanda kind of meandering out there in the Atlantic.
Yeah, our cold fronts that come through, we had, severe weather event last week here in the Tampa Bay area. We're kind of focused on that at this point, and hopefully the tropics stay quiet.
Yeah, that's what it's looking like. Keep your fingers crossed.
All right, fingers crossed from all of us here in your hurricane headquarters, folks. Great to have Justin Kiefer. Good morning, Tennessee. Give him a follow, folks, on social media. You can catch him in the mornings there on WATE's Good Morning Tennessee Morning News. Of course, we have with us at WFLA, tracking the tropics meteorologist man Holly, Eric Stone joining us as well. We are back live every Wednesday, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central for Tracking the Tropics, or sooner if, of course, there is something to monitor in the Atlantic. We'll be back here to take your questions and, of course, talk a little bit more about how the tropics actually, form over the course of the hurricane season. We have it all for you on WFLA.com and the WFLA app. For Justin, Amanda, Eric, I'm JB. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time, folks, on Tracking the Tropics.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.